Hello and welcome back to the VHF Gamer channel. Today we're going to be working on this Game Boy Color. Now you may notice that there's some oddities going on with my audio. I'm actually forced to record over this because when I was originally recording this video I had some sort of oopsie and I lost the audio. So as you can see, this thing's pretty crusty. It's probably the worst electronic device I've ever had on my bench, and I need to figure out how to get this thing open. Those are tri-wing screws, and boy are they rusty. I'm gonna have to try to get those open. Somebody's had a go at the battery contacts, lots of battery corrosion, stickers, original stickers gone, and we'll go ahead and pull out my toolkit and see what I can do. Go ahead and use the iFixit toolkit. As you can see here, I'm already having some troubles. Barely even started and the screws are fighting me. This one's coming out, but as you'll soon see, the whole rest of them, they will just not want to come out. Most of these they're so jam-packed with crud and the heads are rusted off that I just can't get a bite with the screwdriver. This is my first Game Boy that I've ever had on the bench, and hopefully when I'm done this will be something to be proud to own, something that won't make the Game Boy community upset, and it'll be a lot of fun to play, if I can save it at all. I'm going to fast forward a little bit here because it's just a whole lot of me struggling to get this thing open. And as you can see here, I've sped up the video a little bit. I tried multiple tricks to get in there. I tried picking out some of the rust with a little pin. I tried various different bits. Pretty much all hopeless. I tried just about every imaginative thing I could do to get these things to bite, and I just could not do it. It's the top two screws and the top bottom screws. Yeah, as you're going to see, I'm going to have to take some interesting measures in a second. So right about this point, I had taken a little break, thought about it, come back, and decided, okay, enough's enough, time to Dremel this thing. So I have the finest bit for this Dremel I have. I'm trying to go very careful not to damage the board inside. I'm just trying to eat away at the head of the screw so maybe the shell will come apart. And unfortunately that didn't quite work out the way I wanted, but I'm going real slow. This thing's kind of fighting me. It's fighting me to the point where you can see my microphone is laying on the bench. I forgot to, at that point I remembered, oh, I better pin that back to my shirt. Fat lot of good that did. But fighting this thing with a Dremel. I'm going to speed it up again here. So right about this point, I'm starting to get little peaks inside of the case. I'm trying to be very careful, so sometimes it comes off camera so I can see what I'm doing. But I'm getting peaks inside and I'm starting to think, oh boy, what did I get myself into? I'm actually using a PC bracket to try to pry this thing open gently, and it's fighting me, and I realize at this point it's actually this battery contact that's holding me up. There's somebody put a blob of solder on the battery contact, so at that point I just kind of grind it away and I finally get the case open. So here's the big reveal, and oh boy. Yeah, what did I get myself into? I at this point in the process when I was looking at this thing, I'm thinking there's no way anybody's going to believe this thing is this bad. I actually went and downloaded the pictures from the eBay auction. I got it from a seller in Hawaii. I didn't want anybody to think that this was like a fake. I've seen the fake videos. I've seen like the Retro Future. He's talking about the fake videos, and I don't know if you can fake this. Just look at how much corrosion is on this thing. And at this point, I'm trying to be very careful. I'm trying to get the ribbon cable off of the LCD screen, and it is fighting me. It has been in there for so long, and it's so corroded that it doesn't want to come out. And I do not want to make this thing any worse than it is. And finally, it starts to come. And this thing is just telling me, boy, I'm going to fight you every inch of the way. So I finally get that out, trying to be super careful. Um, at this point, I'm probably hunting around for tools. I'm going to try to get a Phillips. Yep, there's the Phillips driver, trying to get those main board screws out. Thankfully, these ones aren't as terrible as the ones on the outside were, but oh, the fun has only started. I haven't realized yet, but those screws that I couldn't get out earlier, they're still there. I haven't gotten those out yet, and I need to get those out to get this board out of the front half of the shell. And I'm going to speed this up a little bit again. And this is right about the point when I realized I had to get those screws out. And of course, there's no head left to grab. So what I'm doing here is I'm trying to use the sharp cutting edge of these wire cutters to very carefully grab the edges of the screw and work it out. Trying to be very, very careful not to score the motherboard or possibly cut a trace. I did not want to damage it. I also managed to find the cheesiest, lousiest pair of needle nose pliers from the bottom of the bass boat that has just been beat to death. And I'm just struggling with this. You can actually see when I had dremeled it a little, it was a little bit of residual plastic. It turns out that I had accidentally melted the original case trying to get the halves apart, and in the end, it won't matter, but it kind of bothered me when it happened. I was not intending to do that. So with screws out, I'm still marveling at just how bad this thing is. I'm picking at the game port a little, and literal flakes of rust are falling off of this poor thing. I'm also at one point or another, I discovered that the volume pot is also likewise ruined. It kind of just you spin it forever, and great focus job here, dummy. But this is the big reveal of the other side of the motherboard in all its blurry glory. I'm also pointing out there's a little bit of green on this poor ribbon cable. I'm wondering if the screen will be savable. Ah, there we go, back in focus. I'm so focused on the board, I wasn't focusing on the camera. The rubber contacts, they seemed absolutely disgusting, but they were intact. There's so much filth, I'm actually struggling to get it off the shell a little bit. It just doesn't want to come off, it's just sticking. These buttons, they seem pliable. They're original. I see a little bit of shiny on the contact, no tears. The amount of dirt on them is expected for normal play, but there's so much grime around them. There's no way of knowing. Did somebody leave this in their garden shed or something near salt water and it just corroded it to death? Or did they leave it in the bottom of their boat? I have no clue. At this point, I'm kind of numb. I'm just, oh boy. Yeah. That's nice and dirty. At this point, I'm pretty much numb. I'm just realizing that I picked a real peach for my first Game Boy restoration. Um, Getting some tools out of the way, and I'm just I don't even want to be touching this thing. It's so disgusting. Uh, I I don't know what. Maybe some insects had a home in this or something. I'm pulling the start and select. Oh boy. Yeah, that's just foul. I don't know if that's spilt soda or rust water or something. Um, the start and select rubber is likewise more or less unharmed. It still seems pliable. It isn't baked, but the board itself, besides being absolutely disgusting, looks fine. I don't see any major corrosion besides that game port and the volume port. You can see a little corrosion peeking out on the volume potentiometer. I mean, uh, it's just at first it was kind of seized, like it wouldn't move at all, and then it kind of just kept spinning forever. So I'm thinking, yeah, maybe I can make this thing still work. It needs some help, needs a lot of cleaning, but I think I can save this thing. I know a lot of people are probably looking at this going, man, throw it in the garbage. And they're probably right, but that just doesn't rub me right. I don't like to throw away things if they have a hope in hell of being saved. And so at this point, I'm just kind of just doing the usual electronics technician thing of inspecting, and I see some green down in the cartridge port. That's going to come back and bite me later, I know for sure. Game Boys are kind of finicky on the best of days, and yeah, I'm pointing it out, some of the green, greenish blue I'm seeing. Otherwise, I'm not seeing any damaged traces or anything like that, just dirt and grime and a lot of work for me. So I'm going to speed this up again, and we'll come in when it's something more important. Also, at this point, I've established this Game Boy. It looks like it was made in 2000, the 51st week of 2000. So right about at this point, I decided it's time to get this screen out of this front bezel, and I'm just picking at. I'm still marveling at how bad this thing is. I'm looking at some sort of clump of what looks like insect droppings, and I'm still not wanting to touch this thing too much. What I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to gently twist the front case to get the double-sided adhesive to let go to give me the screen. Because at this point, I've pretty much decided, yeah, I'm done with this case. I'm going to salvage the parts, and I'm going to get a new case. I'm just trying to get a finger under it, and being very gentle. I've never done this before. I don't know how much force I'm supposed to put in it. I've seen videos and pictures of people doing it, so I'm just trying to be very, very excessively cautious. And finally, I managed to get my finger under it, only to reveal yet more grime. But the screen finally comes out, and I finally get my first clear look at it, and besides some smudges, this thing looks okay. Like, some dirt and grime on it, but I think I can use this. So I don't see any dead pixels or leaking LCD crystal liquid, so time to get this, trying to get this back plate off the back of the case. It looks more or less okay. I was at one point or another wondering what that piece of tape, what purpose that serves. Like I said, I've never done one of these before, but I'm going to need to get that out and be very, very, very careful with that screen. So right about here, I had taken a break. I placed the screen on a handkerchief, and this is an alcoholic towelette, disposable alcoholic towelette, and I'm trying to very gently clean these contacts without damaging them, lifting them, separating them from the ribbon cable or anything like that. I have the handkerchief down to protect the screen because there's so much embedded rust and dirt and gunk in my little blue electronics mat that I'm afraid it will grind itself into the screen. I was pointing out there, I didn't catch the audio, but I was saying that it looked much better. And this is the point where I kind of just start cleaning the board and just, again, trying to get some of this gunk off. I was very happy to see a lot of that around the start and select just immediately evaporated with just a few wipes of the alcoholic rag. And a lot of this stuff is not permanent. It's staining or dirt, and a lot of it comes off. I'm going to fast forward here through the cleaning process. So here's the board after the very first cursory cleaning. There's still a lot to do, but I had taken another break. And at this point, I want to know, does this board have any life in it whatsoever? The battery contacts are so bad that I figure, okay, I'm going to have to jury rig something. So what I'm putting together here is a couple of cheap battery holders. And what you want is you want them in series. So one positive goes to the negative, and the positive and negative goes to the board. The board itself is silk screened, so you know exactly where you're supposed to connect to what and all that. But I'm going to take a jumper lead, and I'm just going to simply make the positive go to the negative on these batteries, which would give you a 3-volt battery. Well, 2.4 in the case of these nickel metal hydride batteries. And then you can see that's a negative on the right and the positive on the left, because you can see that I'm pointing at it in the camera. So I'm going to try connecting this up. I'm going to use black for negative. I didn't know where my red connector went, so I used white. And I'm just trying to make sure I don't get something in the wrong spot, so I'm double, triple, and quadruple checking myself, and I don't want to have something bad happen to this poor thing. It's already had bad enough things happen. So at this point, I'm moving the power switch, and absolutely nothing is happening. Any light, what light you're seeing in the LED is optical illusion. It's not actually illuminated. That's a reflection from the camera. And so I'm trying to jiggle the power connector back and forth to see if I can't get something. It's even fooling my eyes, so I'm shielding it from the camera light just so I can see. And eventually what I do is, at this point, I'm leaning over to grab my bottle of isopropyl alcohol and some Q-tips to try to get some solvent into that battery connector. I grabbed this multimeter to verify that I am getting the correct voltage to this thing. 2.6 volts should be plenty to start this up, just to make sure. It's a little sanity check to make sure I didn't grab some dead batteries. So after a few moments, I wound up changing the batteries anyways, and still fighting to get this thing to get some power. And right around here is when the audio kicks in. So here we go. Helps if I have it on the right setting. There we go. Okay. So how about now? What you got to say now? And the switch feels great. Isn't it supposed to be kind of clicky? Okay. Alcohol. Q-tips. So at this point I'm going to voice over again because it's mostly just me grumbling to myself and breathing into the microphone. I do apologize for that. If I knew a way to filter that out, I would stop it. But yeah, what I'm just going to do here is I'm getting a little alcohol out of the little container and I'm going to dab it into the switch just like so and see if that can kind of break away some of the crud that's formed in this poor thing over however from 50 million eons that it's been sitting in bottom of a bass boat in Hawaii or something. I don't know. Anyways, here's coming back to the original audio. Oh. 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 You see that? Switch is flaky. There we go. Yeah. Okay. So let's see if this screen has any joy. I should probably put some alcohol in this thing too. Although this thing, out of everything on this board, looks pretty good. Give that a second to flash off. This is a very high, this is high proof alcohol, so it should be pretty quick. Yeah, there's still a little on there, but yeah, that's pretty good. I will mention that I did not hear anything out of the speaker. Surprise, surprise. Okay. So the screen came to life for a second. I see a little bit of something going on there. I think the screen hasn't made a good contact. Man, this thing's a peach. Come on, trying to be gentle with this thing. Yeah, you see that? Yeah, that connector's pretty... Uh-oh! Oh! Oh! Oh, did you see that? Let's see if I can get it to do it again. I think it's the power switch. Oh, I saw Game Boy again. Yeah, there's something not making a good connection in the switch. Oh, I saw Game Boy again. Did you see that? Yeah, this switch is, oh. I wonder if I'm touching something I shouldn't be touching. Yeah. Oh, hey, now it's working. No sound. Okay, so I can confirm that this Game Boy does still work. There's some... I'm going to blame this connector in the back for part of this. But I have an idea how I could solve that. Yeah. So here I'm going to do a voiceover again. I sped this up. This is me attempting to get the volume pot to work because I want to hear some sort of beep or bloop out of this thing to tell me that the audio circuit's still working, and I'm having zero luck. I'm not sure which way to turn it. I end up looking at the case to verify it, but this thing's just spinning infinitely. And yeah, not a peep out of this poor thing. I'm feeling a little disheartened about that at this point. Earbuds found. Let's let's give this thing a best chance it has of working. Get some alcohol down into the audio jack. Do the old scrubberoonie. Okay. Let's see what we got. See if the volume pot does anything. I am hearing something. And this volume pot is actually working. That's flipping amazing. Yeah. So let's see if I can... It's very kind of quiet. I don't know how loud the Game Boy is supposed to be. I got my other earbud. In fact, let me make sure this... Yeah, there's actually sound coming out of it. So I got this right up against the mic. Hopefully you heard that. But it is making sound. Holy crap. This thing is actually alive. That's incredible. Wow. So let me get this screen off before I break it. That would make me very sad. Okay. Very gently pulling that out. Let's disconnect the power. Get rid of my janky battery setup. Okay. So what we have here is presumably, I don't have a game, but I don't have a game handy to test this thing, but I mean, cleaning time? And this is part of the program where I speed it up again and do the voiceover because, yeah, this is mostly just a whole lot of me trying to do a little more detail cleaning, more than I had done just that wipe down earlier. And boy, do these Q-tips come away dirty. I don't really say a whole lot. I mostly just kind of ramble on during this part about what I'm cleaning and what I'm seeing, marveling how dirty it is, and kind of just talking about my history with Game Boys, what I had as a kid, and it wasn't much. This is mostly, this project is an attempt to kind of get back at my past, get the things that I didn't get because when I was a kid I had the GBA, so I never really had a color. I never got to experience the color. I got to experience the original DMG, the first Game Boy from 1989, and yeah, you know, I thought that maybe I consider the Game Boy Color to be the definitive version of the original square picture format Game Boys. That cut you saw was me getting up to getting a toothbrush to try to get in some of these through-hole components, particularly around the through holes for the cartridge connector. I'm also just giving the entire board a good scrub. I really sped this up a lot because I spent a lot of time trying my best to detail this thing. I know there's no way I'd ever be able to get everything, but I'm trying my best. At this point, I'm very carefully trying to clean some of those contacts. I'm using a bracket from a PC and one of those alcoholic wipes, and I'm not using pressure. I'm not forcing this into the cartridge port. I'm very gently doing this, tailoring the thickness of the material to make sure that I don't damage the cartridge port at all. Going around with a Q-tip, trying to just get up some of these stains. There's some spots that just refuse to come up. I scrubbed the button contacts very well, and I just hit it over and over and over again, trying to make sure I get as much as humanly possible. Every time I see something that needs a little extra scrubbing, I pull out the toothbrush again, and I'm just really trying my best to save this thing. Trying to give it a little bit of respect, some of the respect that it hasn't gotten after all these years since it was made, all the way since 1998, or in the case of this Game Boy, the year 2000. The Millennial Game Boy, that's what I ought to call it. And I'm back. It's 1 week later, and I have purchased some things. So here's the main board. It still has this horrible, messed up spring. This poor game port is still crispified. Come on, focus. Yeah, that thing's pretty hosed. And there's still a ton of rust, and this thing just keeps spinning forever. So I'm going to fix it. First thing I did was I picked up a replacement game port. Now you may notice this is the game port for Game Boy Advance. This has, you can tell because it's got this extra little bump at the top. Unfortunately, that's all I could find because getting an actual Game Boy Color game port is nigh on impossible. But I ought to be able to make this work. It is electrically the same. Let's see, what else did I get? I got a new volume pot. So I'll be able to replace that. And let's see. I picked up a new shell. Look at that. And some of you might say, oh, well, why are you replacing the shell? Well, that previous shell was so bad. I felt like I was going to get an incurable disease just touching it. It was all scratched up. It was well worn, well loved. And I didn't want a pink shell anyway. So I'm going to put this aftermarket shell on. With the aftermarket shell, new bezel, sweet. Here's the original screen. I'll be reusing that. Here's new rubbers and sticker. I'm questioning if I will use that. Brand new screws, brand new buttons, everything I need. All came in this one kit from one seller on eBay, and it cost 10 bucks. The original rubbers, I've since gone and cleaned them. They feel fine, like they're not messed up in any way. If I go and I pull the new rubber piece out and it's like not as flexible or feels cheap or something, then I'll use the original ones. Unfortunately, I probably won't be using the original buttons because this is just... I have tried to clean this. I really have. I've given it everything I had. I warm soapy water. I got in here, scrubbed it with a toothbrush. I got in here with Q-tips and alcohol, and I just cannot get this. This is basically ingrained, embedded dirt. So I'm probably not going to use that again. And here's one of the original buttons. They're well worn. Whoever used this thing used it a lot. Here's the original IR port. And I was looking at this compared to the IR port that this kit comes with. And I think I'm going to reuse the original port because this... I don't know. I just think this looks a little better. Let's see, what else have I come up with? Yes, to fix this unfortunate springiness going on here, what I did was the new shell comes with a new spring. I had purchased it hoping that it would come with both contacts, both sides, but it only came with the one side. So I took the original one, which was corroded to death, and I salvaged the little spring off of it. So what I'm going to do, I clean this up real well. It's serviceable. I'm going to work this spring out. I'm going to put this one in, and I will reuse this original plate. And then I'll just suck this, whoever put a solder ball right there for whatever reason, I will just clean that off. There's still a little bit of rust I need to get off of this. That's fine. I can do that. I'm not sure how much of the soldering I'm going to show on camera because, focus, my desoldering station is over there, and it's probably going to be a lot of silence or cussing because okay. Well, that happened. Where did the... Okay, the speakers go there. What the hell? Oh, this just completely snapped off. Oh, okay. Well, now's a good time to mention speakers. Okay. So, I had the brilliant idea that I would just use a speaker out of some sort of electronic device. I would look through my stash and I'd find some speaker that would do the job. So I dug and I dug. One of the first things I did was I ripped apart an old, not being used anymore, wireless phone handset, and I came up with this, which is physically bigger than the original speaker. And it doesn't fit the shell. Okay. Well, that's out. So maybe one that's a little smaller. So I dug some more, and I came up with this. This was actually, I think this was the earpiece out of the same... Well, anyways, it's smaller. Okay. Well, it'll fit in there, but I would prefer it to be the same size. So I dug into my stash, opened up another old wireless handset, and there's another huge one. Dang it. So I pulled out the little earpiece, and oh boy, that one's tiny. Okay, and then I pulled apart an old dead multimeter. Well, I'd be fascinated to see if that works, but it probably will sound like garbage. And then I pulled apart a Morse code practice sounder kit I had built a while ago that sucks. And this one's the same exact size as this other one, so yeah. Maybe I will get lucky and maybe this wire was just broken and the speaker actually works. Because if not, I don't know what I'm going to do. Okay, so this is the part of the program where I think I'm going to attack this volume pot first. Nah, you know what? I'm just going to desolder. Let me get this nice and close so everybody can see. So it looks like it's that pin, and then we have, if you compare it to the new one, two little ground wings, so that would be there and there, and then all the data pins. What am I going to do for this to fit, though? So how does this go in here? It would go in like this. So you know, that seems to kind of just fit in there. Like, I don't have to do anything at all. How does the original one fit in there? This thing's so rusty, it doesn't want to go in there. Yeah, it's... Wow. This thing... See these little specks? That's literally falling out of this game port. Wow. Oh. That just fell off. This is going to be fun to desolder. Well, it looks like I'm not going to have to modify the shell. I'll get it in picture. Looks like I'm not going to have to modify the shell. So I'm just going to stick this bad boy on there. This should be electrically identical, and it just has that little extra, if I could get in frame. This should be electrically identical. It just has this extra hump on the bottom. Just gonna stick it in there and it'll be good. I'm not gonna worry about it at all. And I'm back. Okay. I have results. If you're ever curious as to what a Gameboy Color looks like without the game port or the audio potentiometer, well, there you go. Also, while I was at it, I went ahead and got rid of that nasty looking solder blob that was on the end of that power port. I'll clean these up a little bit later, but the important part is this was not too bad. I used a desoldering pump or a vacuum desoldering station to get the what's left of this game port off. Boy, look at this thing. That is kispified. And I used a hot air station to get this off because these two little ground pins fought me. They did not want to come off. This is the new one. Let's see, where's the old one? Here's the old one. And the old one is it's kispified. It's done. Oh wow. It sounds crispy fried too. Oh, now it decides to stop end to end. Well, you're gone. So right about here, I'm going to speed up the footage again because this is just a whole lot of me fiddling with this thing, fighting with it, inspecting how it's going to go on, sizing it, seeing how it fits, that sort of thing. As you can see here, I'm trimming the leads on the audio potentiometer because I discovered that the brand new one, the leads were longer than the original. So it actually overhung a via or two, and I was afraid it was going to cause a short. So I kind of came in there and trimmed it a little bit. I used the old one as a comparison, busted out the TS100 because my soldering station is off to the side as I was pointing. And I got the heated up and flux, lots and lots of flux. Flux is your friend. Whenever you're doing something like this, especially if it's on an old crispy board like this, flux everything. I know that when people go to school to learn soldering, they try to teach you to flux as little as possible and to use just the flux inside the solder. But let me tell you, when it comes down to it, when you're at a real job site and you're building something and you want it to last, say for example you're working for Northrop Grumman and you're trying to build cable assemblies or boards for a UAV, it's going to go fly over the Middle East. You use flux or you lose your job. So I'm just getting in here, trying to tack things down, trying to get them flat to the board, holding the part down with my finger while I'm tacking one leg down, just to kind of hold it in there so I can come in and solder it properly. My iron died for a second there. I had to swap a battery, but as you can see, I came back, I hit it with solder, I refluxed the top pins, and here I'm trying to heat it and press it down, and it's not quite working. I'm trying to get these as perfect as possible. At one point or another, I try to use these cutters to hold the pin down so I can solder it. It doesn't work. It makes it look worse. So I just come back and I hit it with the iron. Dink. And get that out of the way, or it won't start a fire. Okay. So I will need it in a minute to resolder this, but that will come. I'll get to that when I get to it. Next, I want to work on this thing. So that's not soldered in. That's just held in there. Like that. Okay. Gee, I thought that was going to be harder than it was. Man, that thing looks terrible. So, can I just shove this in here like so? Wow, that's nice and straight. Oh. That's why it was sticking out this little slot in the back. Okay. Well, there you go. Fixed. For a grand total of nothing. Is it perfectly straight? No. But it's a boatload better than this thing. And I'm going to speed this part up again. All I'm doing here in this sped up part is I'm taking a little bit of vinegar and I'm going to try to apply it to the battery contacts to neutralize any remaining alkaline electrolyte from the battery leakage. I'm going to let it sit there for a little while to try to eat away some corrosion. I'm going to apply a little to the back of the cartridge port too because there's some corrosion there. Hopefully it'll eat away a little. And then there's this speaker. I'm going to try to see if I can get this thing to work. I'm busting out the soldering iron again. I decided that I don't want to reuse the wires because they may have corrosion up inside the jacket, so I decided to salvage some wires off one of those speakers I had found earlier. And so that's what I do. I nibble away a little of the jacket and get it ready for soldering. It's pretty run-of-the-mill stuff at this point. It's just flux and touch it onto the pads there. But one thing that I really want to do is I want to make sure that they're tacked down right. As you can probably see here, I'm pre-tinning the wires. Makes it easier to solder. And also, I'm taking a peek at it and I decide to use my desoldering station to clear out the holes in the board as I'm pointing out. So, simple matter. Stick the wires in with some flux, tack them down with some solder. This is all sped up because this is, just run-of-the-mill tedious stuff. I tried to get fancy there by spinning the wires, twisting the wires together. I highly doubt that did anything. In fact, I think they came untwisted later on. In fact, they came untwisted right there, so that was a waste. But yeah, I try to get that tacked down decently to try to do a decent solder job. And then right after this is the part of the program where I decide that it's time to clean off some of the vinegar. So I go ahead and get a cotton swab and some alcohol and I clean off the vinegar. Not a lot of corrosion comes off, but it's somewhat decent amount. And I also clean up some of my flux residue from the soldering the game data port and audio potentiometer earlier. Makes it look a lot nicer. Checking the pot still spins, it does. Nice focus again. Lovely job. So at this point I'm thinking about putting it in the shell, and then I discovered that this cartridge plate has a peelable protective layer on it, and I spend an obscene amount of time trying to get this thing off. At one point or another I have to pull it out of the shell because I can't get all the protective plastic off of it. I spent a lot of time trying to do this job. Also, I'm happen to remark about how I like these particular iFixit tools because they have the little spinning cap on the end. It makes it easier to spin the screwdriver using the palm of your hand. Anyways, as you can see, I'm really struggling with this thing, and if I actually played the real audio, there's a lot of profanities happening right now. I'm pretty upset. This is taking way too long. But eventually I do get this junk off and I can put it back in the shell. Oh, and I was pleasantly surprised to find some on the opposite side too. Yep. So back in the shell it goes after struggling with that. Of course, at this point, I'm struggling to find screws, where I put screws. I'm going to have a fun little encounter soon with that, which will consume a lot of my time. I'm also pointing out a blemish on the shield that wasn't there before. And at this point, I'm pulling out the buttons. I'm definitely going to use the new buttons. I decide I want to reuse the original screen. I can always do the IPS mod later, but at this point, I'm running around looking for my double-sided tape that I had bought. And there I am, I found the tape, and I'm sitting here debating on what order I should put these parts on. I've never done a Game Boy of any kind, particularly a Game Boy Color. I'm sitting here, I'm fitting the screen into the new shell, making sure it fits. Want to make sure everything's okay. I'm kind of just giving this a wipe down with a dry Q-tip to get any dust off so the double-sided tape will stick, which it didn't end up working. I haven't used this particular tape in a while. I usually use the 3M Very High Bond stuff, which is thicker, and it'll hold, but yeah, it wouldn't work for this particular job. I'm trying to get in some tape here. I'm using a scalpel because that's what every electronic technician should use, and just kind of trying to get it to stick to the shell to get some to hold the screen in. And this is just me struggling with that. So what I'm doing here is I'm trimming it to size. Great thing about using a scalpel is, man, you can get some precision cuts. Don't want to waste any tape, so I'm reusing the center part there. And I can just get around those angles no problem with that scalpel. And that is a legit medical scalpel too. So if I touch myself with that thing, it's going to turn that green shell red. Let's just say that. Kind of trying to get the tape to stick down to the shell real good. I'm using the blunt end of the scalpel, trimming it real good. And I'm going to try fitting the screen in a minute if I recall correctly. Yep. The screen it had a few smudges on it, so I went ahead and put a little bit of Windex on it and a clean rag, and I cleaned the screen up as best I could. I was trying to be careful. I didn't want to scratch the screen. That would have just broken my heart after it managed to survive all of that in the previous shell. Unfortunately, that double-sided tape wasn't very good, and the screen kept wanting to fall out. I was trying to be very careful. At this point, I was thinking about putting a bezel on, and I decided, nah, I'm going to put that on last. So at this point, it's assembly time. Pulling out the new buttons, the new power switch, and kind of fitting things in there. The IR port I put to the side because I'm not sure I want to use that. Do a little trimming of the new buttons because there was some residual plastic. And then I discovered that they actually are keyed, which is awesome. That makes it you can't possibly put them in backwards. So I pull out the original IR port, and I really struggle here. The aftermarket shell and the aftermarket shell and the original port are just slightly different. And eventually I just kind of jam it in there and it fits. So like the aftermarket port, quote unquote, it looks like completely solid plastic. I don't know how IR could go through it, but I kind of just jammed it in there. It fit. It worked. Kind of had to force it a little, but it didn't damage the shell any. Although I did notice a small defect in the plastic. That spot was not my doing. That was a defect in the mold. So I fit the power button back on again, and the power button keeps falling out on me, of course. And so at this point, I pull out the rubbers, and I'm kind of feeling them. I'm comparing them side by side, the originals and the new ones, and I kind of decide, okay, I'm going to use the originals. These are indeed the original rubbers that I'm putting in, including the start and select buttons. So at this point, okay, I'm ready to go. It's time to put it back in the shell and see what we're getting. I fit that in there nice and careful. I fit the power switch in. For the first time, discover how the speaker is supposed to go in. And it's looking nice. It sure looks a lot better than it used to. I kind of tried to do a little wire management there. So I fit the back of the shell on, and remember that I'm supposed to put the Phillips screws in to hold the motherboard in. So I go ahead and do that, and it's coming together. And I'm getting really excited at this point. Like, oh man, I'm so close. Soon I'll have a Game Boy. I'm going to put the screw in the wrong hole because I don't know any better. And then I look at it and I realize, oops, that's the wrong spot. It's supposed to go over there. So I move it. I struggle with the screws. Again, first Game Boy Color I've ever done. First Game Boy period. So I fit the shell together and it's like, oh, this looks so cool. I'm super, super excited at this point. And the tri-wing screws, I've heard that the aftermarket tri-wing screws aren't the highest quality, but you know, you have to admit they're a lot better than what came out of the original shell. I'm also trying to be very careful here. I'm aware that threading these in is... Oh yes, I had accidentally forgot to put the power switch in. It had fallen out on me. So I had to undo it again. But I'm trying to be very careful here because I'm aware these screws are creating brand new threads in this brand new shell. So I'm not cranking them all down like as hard as they'll go. I'm actually threading them in slightly. And I'm going around kind of like doing lug nuts on a wheel. I'm doing them very carefully, and then I'm going to go around in a pattern and kind of tighten them down just to make the shell fit down nicely. And there we go. I'm just super happy about how this looks. Checking, make sure everything works. I'm finding that the power button is really freaking stiff, but battery time, and it doesn't work. I am so devastated at this point. I'm just completely took the wind out of my sails. I'm tapping on this thing, trying to figure out, can I see anything on the screen? It was just working. So close yet so far. I was even thinking maybe it was the batteries. I got some new batteries just to make sure. Nope, it wasn't the batteries. I wiggled the switch around because I'm still thinking it's the power switch. And also about that point is when I hear the first sounds out of the speaker. Yeah, believe it or not, I actually heard sounds out of the speaker. They were incredibly quiet, but there were sounds coming out of the speaker. So cool. That's kind of encouraging. But I need to be able to see what I'm doing to play a Game Boy, so... At this point, I decide, okay, I'm going to clean up this ribbon cable a lot more. So I kind of struggle with this thing for a while. I clean it, throw batteries in it, check it, no luck. I see some garbage on the screen. I end up getting confused at one point or another, thinking it's the power switch again. So I fiddle with that for a while, hoping maybe that's it and it's not like a bad screen, or if I accidentally ruin the ribbon cable or something. And then I go and I hit the switch with more alcohol, hoping that that'll fix it. I don't know, because again, for the millionth time, I've never done a Game Boy. I've done electronics many times, and usually I have a process for figuring things out, but this thing was just sending me weird messages, and so back and forth. Eventually I get back to the ribbon cable, and I'm thinking, okay, it has to be the ribbon cable. So at this point, I throw the mic down and I take a little break. So you can see when I came back, I had a game plan. I got myself a piece of card. And this is a trick I learned from the radio shop, Buddy over at the radio shop. He will use this trick where he will soak a piece of card or a business card, index card with alcohol or contact cleaner, and he will use it to clean out relays or other very sensitive plated contacts. So what I'm doing is I'll stick the card in, close the connector, and I'll gently pull the card out. And it's getting gunk out of this thing. And I come with a pencil eraser, another trick I learned from the radio shop. Shout out to him on YouTube, by the way. Pencil eraser is a gentle way of removing corrosion. So I do that, I test it, Still no bueno. So all I'm seeing is the very faintest outline of the Game Boy logo. And I'm thinking, okay, what part of the ribbon is causing the problem? So I'm gently pressing the ribbon with the tool, trying to figure out what part is the problem. And I reseat it again, try it, no bueno, different problem. I touch it with the tool, and I kind of start seeing a little bit, like what part of the ribbon is bad and what part isn't. So I come in here, more alcohol, more cleaning, more cardstock. I even double it up, trying to get a good scrub on those pins. And it's hard to see in camera, but every time I pulled that card out, there was streaks of corrosion and gunk in the shape of the pins and the connector left on the card. So I try it. I get in there with some air to blow out the excess alcohol, any gunk it might have, and still nada. And I'm hearing the sound out of the speaker every time I hit that switch, which is encouraging. But doggone it, that screen is just fighting me. And I try pulling the ribbon out slightly just to have a different spot on the ribbon. No bueno. I try tapping it just to see if I can get any life out of it. I'm just really struggling with this. At this point, I decide to pull the whole board out again. That double-sided tape didn't do jack diddly. And now, some of you might cringe at what I'm doing, but at this point, I'm so desperate to get this thing to work. I'm thinking that maybe there's damage underneath this foam. Like, I don't know what it looks like under this foam. So I'm thinking maybe there's another row of contacts, possibly another connector. And so I start picking at this foam. And I get to a point where I realize that I'm barking up the wrong tree. That there's actually no connectors down there. I realize that where it connects to the screen itself is actually on the bottom there, that brown strip. So I pull out my favorite battery connectors again, just for ease of testing. Or my battery holders, I should say. And I struggle with this for a while. I hook it up, double check my polarity and whatnot. This time I decided to use yellow, just for fun. And I'm testing, you can see I dragged my finger across that strip a couple of times, and because I'm thinking that's maybe where that's bad. And then I realized, oh, hello, I got it again. It's definitely that ribbon. And then I discover if I brush my finger over spots, it fades in and out. It's definitely that connector that's the problem. You can see every time I brush my finger off to the right there, it kills it. But when I go to the left, it comes back. So I go ahead and I decide I'm going to pencil eraser this thing to death to get it for sure connected. And I bust out, ironically, an erasable pen. You'll see that in a second. And struggling around in my desk looking for a pencil. And I get this erasable pen, which is just basically the same kind of eraser, and I just scrub and scrub and scrub this thing to death until I'm absolutely certain there's no possible way corrosion is getting in the way. And then I go ahead and I clean it with a little alcohol just to make sure, blow it, dry it, clamp it down, plug it in, and glory be. This time when I rub my finger on the back of it, it does not die. So, time to put it all back together again for the millionth time. I took a little break, had some dinner, got my head straight, and so hopefully this thing still sort of, kind of, hopefully by some miracle works. Alrighty. So yeah, I put the thing back together again, and at this point I've taken this shell off, it feels like a million times, and I struggle with it every single time. I try to do it quickly, and that just makes it harder. You got to do it the right way. Oh, and by the way, I'm using the sharpest implement I own to remove batteries. That's a bright idea. And guess what? It doesn't work. Yay! Back apart it goes. And so at this point, yeah, there's a lot of cussing in the video. I kind of fiddled with it, got the picture, and then, okay, well, I got to put the power button back in and screw the board down and assemble this thing. And then at that point, I'm debating on whether I want to replace the speaker with one of those little ones. So I go ahead and I jam some screws in, lose a screw, because why not? And you'll notice that there's only 5 screws on my build mat. And I spend the next stupid amount of time looking for my lost screw. Yep. At this point, I'm getting very, very frustrated. And I go, okay, you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and put those screws in what I got and just test this flipping thing, even if it's missing a screw. Yep, I had to go and put the power button back in again because I forgot it again for the millionth time. And finally, one screw short, 100% annoyance. I decided to root around on the floor for a while and see if I can't find that screw. Bang my head on the desk a couple of times. That's always fun. In between this point and the next cut, I do test the screen one more time, and it does work. So at least that's some small consolation. See, there it goes. Well, I figured out where the screw is. I wonder if any of you noticed it. Well, be honest, did you notice? I really sped up this next part a lot because this whole next section is completely pointless endeavor. I thought that I would figure out the audio issue by swapping in a replacement speaker, and that maybe I'd get my volume back. It didn't work. I desoldered the speaker, soldered in the other speaker. I kind of just tacked it in there to test. And it was, you could see me doing it. It was no louder than the original speaker. So at that point, I realized there was something actually wrong with the audio circuit. I wasn't sure what. I was thinking maybe it was this audio jack. So I struggled with the audio jack for a while, cleaning it, putting some alcohol in it, doing the trick with the paper and the alcohol. It never made any difference. It was always very, very quiet. Like you could have max volume and it up to your ear and it would make no difference. I tried tweaking that potentiometer on the board because I didn't know any better, thinking maybe that was a secondary audio potentiometer. Nope, it wasn't. It had nothing to do with the audio. It's actually for the screen, and I'll end up fixing that later, so don't worry. But yeah, I really struggled with this. I fought it. I scraped at the... It's got some black corrosion in there, and yeah, nothing I did made any difference. This was just probably, what, a half hour or an hour of absolute wasted time. But I'm showing it here anyways, because this was just part of the diagnosing process, so this is how it works. Eventually, I put the original speaker back in. Good morning. It is now the next day, and I've had an opportunity to sleep on this thing. Yep, it's apart again. Is anybody surprised? So, I really want to figure out whatever the hell's going on with this audio problem with this thing. Last night before I went to bed, I pulled the audio jack off completely and I left it overnight in a gentle cleaner, and hoping it would eat away at some of the corrosion inside. And then I cleaned it out real good, resoldered it back onto the board, and much to my dismay, same problem. Audio's still low. So I was drinking some coffee this morning and thinking, you know, this Game Boy, according to the date code on this, 0051, I'm going to say that's the 51st week of 2000. Designed in 1998, according to the board, 97, 98. So this is smack in the middle of the capacitor plague. And now, if you don't know what that is, 1995 to about 2005, somewhere in there, there was this problem with capacitors in all electronics, pretty much. Some worse than others. Long story short, they were junk. They were absolute garbage. So I thought, okay, why don't I see if these capacitors are bad? So I dug into my stash and I got a 100 microfarad, 16 volt, I don't know what the hell this is. And I'm going to try doing the old come in here, parallel it, and see if anything changes. So here's my favorite battery battery holders. Get it right eventually. See, negative to positive. And let's see here. This is positive to BT positive, negative to the last one remaining. Let's get this power switch out of the way. Okay, so nothing's changed. I can still hear it. I try holding it up to the microphone to see if that would, you know, if you guys could hear it. I can barely hear it. So I'm going to come in here. You want to get the polarity right. The stripe right there. It actually says on the board, positive and negative, so not short anything out. Okay, that made no difference. So let's try over here. I could still hear the Game Boy sound, it just was, the volume was unchanged. Come on, I'm trying to get a good contact. I'm having a little trouble getting a good contact here. Oh. Hello. That was louder. Okay. That made a difference. How about this one up here? Still got the polarity correct. Okay, that doesn't seem to make any difference. Let me go back to this one. Yeah, that's definitely louder. Let me go back. I was having trouble getting in contact on that one, so let me go back here and double check and make sure this one doesn't also do that. No. No, not changing the volume any. It seems it's just this one. Yeah. So that capacitor right there, if I parallel this 100 microfarad in, I get my volume back. Okay. Holy moly. Oh yeah. That cap is junk. It's 100 microfarad, well, it's coming in as 85. The ESR is 88 ohms. Oh, okay. That's junk. Let me go get that. I think I'm going to do that chip cap off that one phone, so I will return in momentarily. Okay, and here's the little tantalum. Let's see what this has to tell me. Okay. So the cap is rated for 150. It's coming in at 142. And the ESR is 1/4 of an ohm. And the V-loss is much better. Well, this little guy might just be the ticket. I'm going to go slap it on the Game Boy and see what happens. In fact, let me just do that. And speed up again. Same story. Solder, flux, solder, flux. As I mentioned before, that I robbed that chip cap out of an old scrap piece of electronics. So I'm just doing this for testing, just to see what happens. And, hey, you know, maybe it'll stay in there, maybe it won't. But I want to have some freaking audio for my games. So just sticking in there, try to get it straight, and then we're going to test it, see what happens. Hey! We just put this close to the mic so you guys can hear it. Yeah, there we go. Now how about the headphones? Is it better in the headphones? Oh yeah, it's definitely better in the headphones. Let me try the other earbud. There's a buzz to it though. Oh yeah, it's nice and loud in the headphones. I wonder if that buzz is because of the other cap. I wonder if they're all bad. several days later. So, I have returned, and I have news. First off, maybe you can see that this thing is working. With audio. And so, there we go. So, this is working quite nicely, but I want to make this thing just a little bit better. You're not going to be able to hear it, but when I hook up some headphones to this thing, there's a nasty buzz in the background. So I've decided to just pony up the cash and buy some proper capacitors. This one is 16 at 22, which is that. Let me turn this off. There's this little one that was for the LCD. That's what this one is. Got it from Mauser. This one is a 100 microfarad 4 volt, which will replace that kind of bodgy 150 microfarad tantalum that I put in there. And this is the mod. This is a 680 microfarad 6.3 volt, which is going to replace that big, get the batteries out of here. It's going to replace this big one right in here. And this one is for power regulation, and it also, it turns out, I looked at the schematic again, and it does interact with the audio. And this is a filter cap right here. So if I bump the capacitance up on this, it should hopefully get rid of some of that buzz. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And turbo button activated again. This is the same thing as before, just ripping the thing apart again for the millionth time. You might notice that I put the sticker on there. I kind of messed up the corner a little bit. I might leave that on there, I might not. It's aftermarket sticker. The original one didn't have one, so, you know, I don't particularly care. Also, I'm pointing out that I tweaked that potentiometer back to, it turns out the potentiometer controls the quality of the picture on the screen. So I have that dialed back in. It kind of flickers when it's not right. So if your Game Boy's flickering, adjust that pot. Also, I'm using contact cleaner for the game cartridge port, the audio port, to finally dial those in. Ponied up the money, bought that from Mauser. Pulling out the soldering iron now. And yeah, I'll be ready for this job to be done. Pretty straightforward. Mauser's great because you know the caps you're getting are legitimate. There's nothing wrong with the having that mod on there. The 150 microfarad, that's not going to hurt anything. I just wiped that thing off there. It's no big deal. But I could have left that there permanently and it wouldn't have made any difference. I might hold on to that later for some other project that needs it. But when in doubt, you can always scavenge parts from things and just make stuff work. There's no shame in that. So yeah, just going to tack this down. I'm going to do all three of them just to make sure that the job's done. The video doesn't show it, but I've already tested that capacitor, that big one that's in the audio circuit, the filter cap. And I tested that. It was just as bad as the one I had tested earlier. It had a high ESR. The rating wasn't right. It had a horrible resistance. So it's got to go. It's junk. And 100 microfarad wasn't really enough for that circuit anyways, thus the 680 microfarad. It's often recommended, various different Game Boy communities. As you can see, the form factor is exactly the same. It's a direct drop-in replacement. Just remember to flex it up real good and try to get it straight, get your polarity right. Clean the tip. That's what I'm doing every time you see that cut Pepsi can appear in the picture, is me cleaning the tip. And yeah, oh, and you might have also noticed earlier I had one of those ROM carts, one of those cheap Chinese ones. The reason why I have that is because I was afraid that this rusty Game Boy would wreck up like a legit cart, and I could only imagine stuffing like a $50 copy of Pokemon Red in there or something, or $100 copy of Pokemon Crystal, and the stupid rusty eBay special will just destroy the cartridge. So I'd rather destroy a $20. Yeah, I see the ESR on that thing. It's horrible for that 22 microfarad. So yeah, all three caps were garbage. The picture was working, and besides adjusting that trimmer cap, I had no problems. So form factor is the same on those caps too. If it matters, you can get the part number off of the when I showed the bag. I might also put it in the description if I remember. This one was a particularly hard one to remove because it was very tight quarters. And you can see here I'm just going around double checking all my solder joints, making sure all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed, and final test of the Game Boy. Play a little Tetris again just to see how it's working. Audio's fantastic now. I don't really notice any buzzing, and I actually had a pretty decent game going here for a minute, and I kind of forgot I was filming, so yeah. Been a long time since I sat down and played Tetris for real. Probably sometime in the 90s. So I kind of forgot I was here. Anyhow. So at this part, I'm pulling out some very high quality electronics technician's contact cleaner. And this stuff is a lot better than your typical run-of-the-mill alcohol, which I'm using some alcohol to clean up a little of my flux residue from the recap job. But that contact cleaner, it's great stuff. It not only will get the gunk off the contact and make it work again where alcohol wouldn't, it will also protect it from further corrosion. I'm putting a very, very tiny amount on the back of this game port here just to kind of hopefully stop some of what it was doing. I'm blowing a little air behind the screen because I noticed there was some stuff behind the bezel. It's mostly just cleaning it up, putting the final touches on it. And it was around at this point when I'm cleaning this up that I noticed that in the 50 million times I had pulled the case apart and put it back together, I had damaged it, unfortunately. There's a small crack in the back, and there's a small crack in front. But it's not the end of the world. It's not an official Nintendo shell. It's only $10 for the whole kit, so I may get another one. I may not. This is meant for me to play. So if it gets beat up, well, you can see the crack there. That's one of them near where I'm putting that screw in. It's very unfortunate. I don't know how that happened. I don't remember causing that. Giving it a wipe down, just, make it presentable. And there's the other crack. I just noticed that. Very, very sad. Sounds pretty good. Just think, this thing's gone from this to this. Not bad, huh? Okay. Nope, wrong button. I'm playing this through the camera. I should probably look at the actual screen. Trying also not to have too much glare. This is going to be an insta-kill. Yep. In case you're wondering, that's the formula to find voltage. Voltage equals current times resistance. It's going to be another Zubat. Yep. Oh, this one's tougher. It's probably still going to insta-kill it. Oh, no. There's a tiny little tick left. Not that it's going to... So. That might end it. Nope, never mind. Yes. I named that Pokemon Lidocaine, and this one's Yeetus, and this one's Federalis. What of it? Okay. So what would I change doing this over again? Well, this was my first one. Things I would change. I'm noticing this bezel screen protector is getting scratched just from casual wiping. So I'm not a fan of that. I know that they have glass replacements of these, so I would probably want to get one of those. Man, that crack really bothers me. I mean, this isn't an official Nintendo shell, so I could just pay $10 and get another one, and that would eliminate that. So, there was a lot of work that oh wow, I cracked it right there too. Wow, this thing cracks easy. I need to be aware of that. Well, okay. Here's the original shell. And yes, it's still disgusting, and yes, I have not cleaned it. But yeah, I don't think I can salvage this because I had to do some unfortunate things to get these screws out. And that scratched up bezel too. I saved it just because it's the original, but I doubt I'll ever use that again. This is probably because I was opening and closing it so many times. Man. That's... Okay, so maybe I wouldn't get like a clear... Because I don't think you could see that if it wasn't clear. But yeah, I guess try to get the label on a little better. This was my first attempt, and this is not going to be like a Game Boy that I ever sell or anything like that. This is my Game Boy, so yeah, this is my... Oh, dang it, I see a speck right there. of dirt I need to get out. This is going to be my Game Boy that I'm just going to play and crash around. And when I screw up this shell, I'll just go get another one. Man, that bothers me a lot. I wonder how that happened. But yeah, resurrected from the dead. And so that's it, guys. That's the end of the video. If you stuck it out this long, I want to say thank you for watching, and I really appreciate it. I have noticed that during editing this video, my video doesn't have that annoying background noise when I'm recording directly into the computer. So from now on, I'm going to try to change my recording process to try to get rid of some of the background noise, the clock ticking, the chair creaking, drawers opening and closing, and worst of all, the sound of my breathing, because that drives me nuts. I can only imagine it drives you guys nuts. I try to avoid that, but you know, people gotta breathe. So anyways, again, thank you, and I really appreciate it if you watched. So I'd like to leave a shout out to some of the people who've inspired me to be able to do this job. The Radio Repair Shop, Shango 066, the Retro Future, and Mr. Carlson's Lab. And with that, I will leave you guys with the sound of this old IBM 5150 winding down. Take care.